You asked for it. You asked, bleh. Oh, y'all are gonna have to give me a break. I drove 13 and a half hours. I got in bed 5 a.m. and I've had 3 hours of sleep. So you're lucky I'm even here. Let's try it one more time. You asked for it. The pack loadout from Chicago, Illinois. I mean, Chicago, Illinois. No, Chicago, Illinois. Yeah. All right, FTFers, the very first thing that I want to address is I get lots and lots of comments about, Jay, how do you get your loadout and your family's loadout and groceries and stuff that you bought at the store into the Jeep when you have so much stuff in the Jeep? Well, it's a valid question, and I'm gonna show you how I do it. Number one, I have all of this room in the top. So all I have to do is take the bags and I slide them into the top. And a lot of people would say, well, how do you see behind you? Well, thankfully in the Jeep, I have a screen where I can put the backup camera on that screen and I can see what's behind me. And I'll be honest with you, in a Jeep, it's really hard to see out of the rear view mirror anyway. The next thing that I want to show you is the back seat. This is a 4-door Jeep, and look how much room I have inside of there. So what I do is I take my bag typically, and I put my bag right here in the Jeep. And there you have it, right there in the middle. There's plenty of room on this side, and there's plenty of room on this side. And now that I feel better about myself anyway, we're gonna go over the stuff that you came here to actually see, the pack loadout. Now, disclaimer, this is not my usual loadout. This was a specialty loadout just for me to go to Chicago. And now that I'm back home, I'm actually gonna have to take this pack, take it apart, and put together my winter pack. So if you wanna see that video, let me know in the comments. Now, it doesn't matter where I go, the principles always remain the same. The gear that's inside of the bag, it may change according to where I'm at, but the principles are always the same. It's always based on my survival priorities. And I also want to say that this pack is very similar to that like what you would have on an airplane. The only major difference is that I could actually have a blade, but it could only be 2.5 inches long. And so that's the major difference in what I took up there to Chicago. I mean, this is not my normal loadout. Y'all have seen, you know, my knives and my saws and all the other things that I carry, especially these. I had to be light, fast, and mobile, and I had to be tactically efficient. And the largest part of any kit is always going to be your shelter elements. Now, your clothing is your first line of defense, and if you want to see my clothing, then you can go back and you can watch the last video. And so in this case, I really beefed up my shelter elements with my clothing because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to carry an actual shelter with me. And plus, I mean, I was in a city, right? It's not like I'm going to be setting up a hammock or a tent or any of the other things, right? I needed to make sure that my clothes could do the job. So in reality, that's what took up the majority of the bulk inside of my bag. Now let's get to the bag itself. It's a 511 bag. And a lot of people are going to be asking, why did you choose to carry that? Because I've never seen you carry it. And the reason is because, well, I needed a bag that didn't look tactical or military because I'm in an area where there's a lot of military people. And so my Hill People bag, it actually looks like a special operations bag. Now down here in the South, not many people are going to know that. And so I can get away with it here. But up there, I knew that I had to have something that looked like an actual civilian bag. But I didn't want to sacrifice, you know, quality while I was out there. So that's why I chose to carry this bag with me up there. All right, so let's get to the contents of the bag. So in this first zipper, what do I have? Well, this is kind of like an admin pouch where I keep like pens, pencils, something to write on, map tools, etc. And I just wanted to have it really nice and accessible there on the front. Now, adjacent from this one, I also have another one, which that carries my 4-way valve right here, my Silcock key, and yes, I did find Silcocks out there. I did check them, 2 of them worked that I checked. It's always a good idea to carry something like this when you're off in a city in case you need to get water. Now inside of this pouch right here, this is where I keep my electronic stuff. This is actually my film and stuff where I keep the mics and the receivers and the cords and all that kind of stuff. I actually have a light, but the stuff that matters to y'all, I also, you know, have the ability to charge up my phone, both in the wall and if I need to, I have a battery bank, which I can also charge in the hotel if I need to. But this pretty much will charge my phone, my GPS, my ham radio, all those things. It has all the plugins that I need in order to do that. You just got to make sure that you have the cords and obviously a full charge. One thing that I love about these straps is I can carry things. So this is my titanium cup that I carry with me if I want to make coffee or I just want to mix up some electrolytes or whatever. It's just nice to have a cup. And because of the handles, it'll fit quite nicely right here. And I could also take my ball cap and I can tie it into there as well, and everything is nice and secured right there. In the last video, I showed y'all my shemagh. I mean, you should just have one, okay? If you haven't seen enough videos which explain why you should have one of these, you need to look into them. Having a good quality shemagh is something that I recommend highly. And I like to have it accessible to me right here on the outside in case I have some kind of first aid need, or if I had to make like an improvised smoke mask, if there was like a riot or something, or I needed to conceal my identity. So I keep it right there on the side. Now over on the other side, this is where I keep my titanium grail. And in the bottom of this container right here, this is actually the pre-filter. Whoops. Let's try that again. There is the lid that actually goes to the grail cup. And yeah, I chose to take this one instead of taking 2 containers. I knew that it would be hard for me to keep one thawed out so that it wouldn't freeze. And I didn't want to take the chance. If this were to freeze though, I still have the option of using this as a container. And I also have the option of using this to boil water. And everything fits into a nice, neat little package like this, and it just slides right into the outside of the bag itself. Now, if I was super worried about it freezing, then I could put it inside of my jacket, or I could also put it inside of the bag. Now we can access this portion of the bag, and this is where I keep my food. I've got nuts, and I've got beef jerky, I've got electrolytes, I've got coffee. Let's see, oh, yeah, you gotta have your fork spoon combo. I've got some sugars in here as well. And let me see, do I still have some? Yes, I do have it. Hot chocolate. It's really important to have calories with you, and I'm going to explain why here and tell y'all a story that happened to us while we were up there. So I always make sure that I have plenty of food and I have the ability to heat it up, to warm it up. I really don't like to carry stuff that I have to boil water or I have to cook or prepare or whatever. I really like stuff that just comes out of a package. It's just so much easier. And if you're on the run, I mean, a non-permissive environment, that's the kind of stuff that you want. Now let's get into the main compartment and let's see what I have in here. All right, so right on top here, this is basically the fire section. This is where I keep my spare lighter. I also have my Exotac fire steel. I've got an extra candle for my Yuko candle, and I'm gonna talk about that here in a minute. And then I also have this road flare. If I really had to start a fire, fire is really important in the kind of environment that I was in. So I wanna make sure that I have redundancies built into the pack. And it's just a good idea. So, it's a small little area in the bag, doesn't take up much room and doesn't take up a lot of weight, but I got fire covered. This portion of the pack, this is where I keep my toiletries and stuff. I keep a toothbrush, some toothpaste. I've got my soap, I've got my comb, and then I also have my deodorant. And that's all I've got there. That's all I need. And a little trick, if you're out of town, you can always go to the hotel and you can ask for a complimentary toothbrush. Now in this part of the bag, I mean, the majority of it is the clothing itself and the layers. I'm actually wearing every single layer right now except for the actual barrier layer itself. And that's kind of weird because it's actually colder here than it was up there. I've already showed y'all these in a previous video, so I'm gonna set them off to the side. And let's get to the meat of the pack right here. Oh yeah, there's my extra socks and my extra underwear. People asked in the last video, yes, it's all wool. I wear Merriwool for my underwear and I wear Darn Tough for my socks. And then here is my balaclava, which I showed in the last video. So let's get to this other stuff right quick. The very first thing I'm gonna grab out of here is a Faraday bag. Inside of there, I have my actual ham radio, and then I also have another light that has backup batteries inside of it. I also use this to protect my phone and our credit cards while I was out there as well, because digital theft is a serious crime out there in Chicago, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't run into any problems. And so that's part partly how I did it. All right, the next thing that I'm gonna pull out of here are the body warmers. We actually used these while we were out there. My son, he had to wear his uniform, his blues from the base while he was out. And it did get down to -1 and we had 30-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. And so we were able to take these, put them inside of his clothes and keep him warm while we were out walking the streets of Chicago. Plus, these things weigh absolutely nothing. And it's just, I mean, you should have these. I know MacGyver, who watches, he's one of the fans in the comments section. He actually has an electrical way of doing this, and then he has a battery backup that he can recharge it. It's something that I definitely want to look into. So if you're out there, brother, post in the comments where I can find that stuff so I can try to make that happen in the future. I really like that idea. These are my Giver gloves. I've already showed y'all those in the last video. These are really awesome gloves though. I mean, I just can't, I mean, I even have my name on them, for crying out loud. Giver gloves are incredible. I just can't recommend them enough. Now, this right here is my solo stove, and a lot of people are probably wondering, why on earth do you have a solo stove? I mean, let's just say that I actually had to start a fire while I was out there. I mean, I did find some woods while I was out there, and having the ability to have a fire that's contained like this, especially in a non-permissive environment, it's priceless. I just can't talk enough about that. And also, you'll notice that I have a Trangia stove here. It's really nice to just put that in the bottom of the stove, and then you have a stand, and if you want to make your coffee, boom. It's all self-contained. Everything fits together really nicely. It just nests really well. And this is a system that I really like. And you'll notice that I'm actually burning heat as the fuel for the stove. Now, this serves two purposes. Yes, it helps me with the stove. Yes, it also helps me with the vehicle, because if you have ice crystals in your fuel tank, then the car doesn't run very well. Another reason why I have the solo stove is just maximizing my resources. You know, if I did have to have a fire and I had to warm up some water, coffee, tea, you know, whatever the case may be, melt some snow, melt some ice, whatever it is, you can do it very easily with a solo stove. It doesn't take up a lot of room, it doesn't weigh a lot, and it's just really efficient. Next, obviously, first aid. I do have a video on how to put together a first aid kit, so you can go back and you can watch that. But, you know, I think it's really important to have a first aid kit in case something happens when you're out in the field. Now, the last thing that's in the kit is actually my UCO candle, and I've actually got a story. We actually used this for, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours probably. And the reason that I know is because the candle inside of here burned out, which means I went through an entire candle, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you that story. All right, so the story that I want to share with y'all is while we were out there in Chicago, we actually got stranded for several hours. So after the graduation ceremony, one of the recruit graduates decided to go AWOL, and so they decided to punish the entire group of guys, and so they had to stay on base until that one person came back to the base. Now, because of that, that meant that the parents actually had to stay in their vehicles in the parking deck. Now, we were on the 4th tier, which was totally exposed. There was no roof and there were no walls. At the time, there was a range from, you know, it was in the teens down to -1, and there were 30-mile-an-hour gusts of wind. So the reality of that situation is we were actually stranded right there on a parking deck. Now, I talk about the X factor a good bit on this channel. There are just things that are gonna happen that you have no foresight, that you have no knowledge of, that are gonna occur to you while you're out in the field. And those are the things that you have to be prepared for. So what I did was I turned on the Jeep and I let it run for a little while and got everything warm inside of the Jeep. And then I would turn it off and I would take the UCO candle and I would hang it from the rear view mirror inside of it, and I would burn it, and that would keep, you know, enough radiant heat to make sure that we stayed alive. I'm gonna be honest with you, my family, my wife and my son, they decided to go off into one of the buildings a couple times because they were a little bit cold, but really that was because they were uncomfortable. They weren't so cold that they were gonna die or anything. They just probably were bored from sitting in the Jeep for so long, and also, you know, they just wanted to, you know, move around and you know, see stuff and get a little bit warm. But what I can say is that this UCO candle, it came in clutch, and thank God I had it. Now, one thing that you have to do is you have to conserve resources in a scenario like that. Let's say that we were stranded on the road itself, there was an ice storm or something like that. You don't know how long you're actually gonna be there, and so it's a good idea to go ahead and start rationing those supplies as you go. Now, there are also other tricks that you can do to stay warm. We used the rest of our layers that I had in my backpack. And it's important to note, I don't leave my bag in the hotel. I take it with me everywhere I go because you never know when you might need the contents of the pack. So I had my extra clothes, I had the body warmers, I actually had food, and I had the ability to make things like hot chocolate and coffee. You know, it's always good to make some Ranger coffee when you're really cold, because the name of the game there is calories and staying hydrated. I also had enough water in the vehicle that wasn't frozen that we were able to drink. And like I said, we had to stay on the base. We weren't able to leave. The only places that we could go to was, there was a museum, which took about 10 minutes to go through. And then they had the next building, which is where basically commissary is. The rest of the time, we just had to stay in the vehicle, and thank God I had all of the stuff that we needed. It's also important to note that my family, they packed very well for this trip. I was really proud of them. They had everything they needed as well. It's really important, if you're in charge of your family, obviously, that you be able to take care of everybody in your family, and that requires a little bit of training and education. All right, so let's go over our survival priorities. Let's start at the top. Defense, yes. I had this really nice fox knives. It's an Italian-made karambit, and I got this from Battle Box, and I'm just super grateful to have it. Thankfully, I didn't have to use it, but just having the peace of mind knowing that you can take care of yourself in a situation like that, that's priceless. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. I also had my tactical flashlight, which I don't know if you've ever punched somebody in the face with a roll of quarters, but that's kind of like what this is. I can also use it for blunt force trauma and slap somebody in the face. And then of course, I've got some martial arts training. I wouldn't say that, you know, I had an entire pace plan for my self-defense, but you know, there were guys walking with guns all around us. But I gotta be honest, I don't feel comfortable. I guess I would wait for one of them to go down, and then I would pick up the weapon that I actually needed because I know how to use it. So that was my plan. I hadn't even considered calling the cops. I guess you could do that as, you know, whatever. I don't depend on the cops, okay? I depend on me. All right, coming down the list, first aid, yes, I've got my first aid kit. I also have other things inside of the kit where I could improvise in the field should I need to, so I had first aid covered, and yes, I'm definitely trained. Next on the list, we've got shelter, and that's just, you know, another way of saying being able to regulate your core body temperature. I depended heavily on my clothes to do that, but I also had the UCO candle, I had the body warmers, I had food, and I could stay hydrated. Water, yes, I had the water. Obviously, I also had the ability to filter, to purify, and to source it, like with my Silcock key, for example, should I need to. Fire, obviously I had redundancy built into that kit. And I wanna say another word too, it's not just what's in my kit, my EDC is a huge part of what I have. And I have tons of videos on EDC. If y'all wanna see like an updated version of my EDC, then let me know in the comments section and I'll do another EDC video. Now, as far as food goes, I try to balance it out. I try to have proteins, and I try to have carbohydrates and sugars, and I try to have, you know, all of the things, right? It's just really important. In this particular case where we had to wait around for 8 hours, yeah, having food was important. Rest is another one that's often overlooked. And yeah, you know, the ability to stay warm and to keep yourself comfortable, that's really important to be able to catch some Z's. I was able to keep the vehicle warm enough. I could lay the seat back and I could take a nap, and you know, I might nap for 20 to 45 minutes at a time. But rest, yeah, that's crucial, and I could definitely do that with this kit. Communication is another one, right? I had my phone. I tried to keep it charged up as much as possible. Speaking of keeping things full, the gas tank was full the entire time. If I got to, you know, about 3/4 of a tank, I would fill it back up just to make sure that I had enough fuel. But then I also kept the batteries charged up, like in my ham radio, for example. You know, because cold, it really affects batteries, and so you need to keep those things topped off as much as possible. I have been in environments where it's, you know, like -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and you can literally kill like your phone or a camera in a matter of minutes. sometimes in extreme climates. So if you're in extended cold environments, you need to make sure that you try to keep those batteries topped off as much as possible, and also try to keep them warm, all right? Don't expose them to the air. Keep them buried inside of a pack if you can. As far as signaling goes, I mean, I have stuff like that covered in my kit, right? I have audible and visible means. I have my whistle that's on my watch. I also have my Wazoo whistle that's in my cash belt. And if I needed to start a really big fire, I do have the road flare. I could just pull a bunch of stuff together, find some greenery, you know, and if y'all want to see a video on how to make an actual signal fire, it's intensive, it takes a lot of work, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice for y'all. But I definitely had signaling taken care of as well. And last but not least, hygiene. Hygiene is really, really, really important, and nobody ever talks about that, but I do because I believe in it that much. Having wool socks, having wool underwear, having the correct base layers, having a toothbrush, having the ability to, you know, keep yourself clean in any environment, and also trying to keep your clothes clean as well. That's something people don't talk about. If your clothes are really dirty, then they're not going to function properly. And so try to stay neat. And probably the most important thing that you need to realize here is if you don't have this stuff with you and you need it, you're screwed. So once again, I make it a habit of not leaving anything in the hotel room that I don't have to. I try to carry everything with me at all times when I'm in an environment like I was up in Chicago. So there you have it. We went through the full entire list of survival priorities and how I accomplished that within my kit. I appreciate y'all being patient. I was out on the road. I was doing a lot of stuff. To be honest with you, it was hard to film while I was out there. So as soon as I got home, this was the first video that I did just because y'all asked for it. So if you're honey smack digging the video, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And until next time, y'all, keep fueling those fires.